Okay, so good afternoon. We'll get going in just a second here, but a very interesting day in the market. My Viacom is just trading in a channel. And what that means is there seems to be a low and a high, and it just stays within that channel and doesn't break out, which I'm waiting for it to do. So it's not much fun, but to those wondering, and I posted this on our financial page, I have 3 stocks right now that I'm in. DraftKings, I took a position in. Palantir, I took a position this morning in DNMR, but my big thing is still Viacom. It's just so undervalued. It's just crazy. I don't understand why it hasn't popped yet, but eventually it will. And somebody will figure it out and get bought out. So over the weekend, news broke that Time Warner, AT&T, which owns them, also owns HBO, is buying Discovery Channel and creating a third company, which will be their streaming media company. So that was actually big news in the media world today. I'm wondering how that will affect our position. But today, for a conversation, I received an email this morning. And first of all, good afternoon. I hope all of you had a spectacular weekend. The weather was amazing. Just a great time to live on the shoreline in Connecticut. A truly spectacular time of year. For a topic today, as we go over topics, it's really kind of a slow weekend and a slow day. The change of presidents, it's incredibly evident when we look at this, because there's not a stream of tweets to talk about. There's not a stream of fights online. There are political discussions to have over a stimulus package or a transportation bill or those sort of things. Those are kind of in the weeds conversations, and we'll get to those later in the week. But after last week, where we had a pretty specific and pointed discussion about Branford issues, housing authority issues, and those things in Branford, I got an interesting email this morning. And that email, apparently there was some political gathering over the weekend of mostly Democrats. And there were people there, I should say, that were not my biggest fan. That's fine. And so there were people that were the huge fans of this podcast and listen on a regular basis. And so there's had a discussion over whether I was biased or Republican or Democrat or what have you. And my response to that was, okay, send a list of questions and I will answer those questions on air. And I wanted to do that. Part of the reason I went from the last 11 years or so having a news website to getting on camera and having this conversation was because of the transparency. It's not a matter of, I'm here. You can ask questions. You can post. You can say hi. You can challenge something I say. You can see the reasoning that I have when I come to a conclusion or a belief. You can also see if I change that belief based on updated information. We live in a world where we have to pick sides, and I don't believe that. And in some of the answers to these questions, I'll explain my background a little bit that may help understand why I think the way I do and why I process information the way I do. I'm not going to be for everyone. I know that. I don't have to be. But if you enjoy the podcast and you're wondering how it got started or why we started it or why I started it and why the transition took place, this is the episode for you. So the first question was an interesting one. I'm going to pull up the exact list. The first question was, and remember, this was a Branford meeting of people that primarily Democrats were present at. And the first question is, are you friends with Jamie Cosgrove? So Jamie Cosgrove is the first selectman of Branford. I have, in many cases, defended Jamie Cosgrove on his approach to running government, the projects that have gotten done in Branford, that sort of thing. The truth of the matter is, I have never been to a social event outside of politics with Jamie Cosgrove. I did not know him before he ran for office. He was an RTM member early on, didn't really know him then. When he decided to run for first selectman is when I got to know him a little bit more. I worked on the Young to Ross campaign in 2009, which is a Democratic campaign. So to this day, I've never been to Jamie Cosgrove's house. I couldn't point out his house if I wanted to. We interact on a professional level. We have conversations. I'm blunt. He's relatively blunt, but he's that way with everybody. He's straightforward and honest. And so, no, I would not say that. Am I friends with him? I'm friendly enough with him. I've never been to his house for a barbecue. We'll put it that way. I've never gone out for drinks with him. I've seen him at lunch at different restaurants in town. That's as far as it goes. When it comes to politics, what I will forever admire and forever respect are people who are honest. And you could disagree on policy, but if you're honest and straightforward, I will always respect that. I had Vin Candelora on here, felt the same way. I've had Sean Scanlon on here, felt the same way. They don't hesitate when they answer. They don't beat around the bush. They've done their research. They know what they're talking about, and they explain the issue. What's significantly different about politics at different levels is once you get to, most of us have chosen a political party based on things that are national. So we are 18 and we go to register to vote, or whatever age we go to register to vote, but we say to ourselves, all right, because of abortion, I want to be a Democrat or Republican, or because of military spending, I want to be a Democrat or Republican, or income inequality or wealth inequality or race issues, we decide. As we get older, the things that matter most to us may change. As we buy houses, how we have kids. At 18, education may not matter as much on a local level, but once we have kids, it does. Property taxes may not matter as much at 18, but as we get to 30 and 35 and 40 and buy a home, they make a big difference. So the way we think in our ideology may change. The issue that I had significantly was, at a time in my life when I registered, I felt very strongly about income inequality. And if you've listened to this, we've talked many times about financial literacy and the impact on that on inequality in general, but especially income inequality. I felt strongly for the Democratic side, that not towards socialism, but I had no issue with higher taxes, as long as those taxes went towards the greater good. They went towards roads, and they went towards helping the people on the lowest end of that totem pole. That doesn't mean I was for waste, and there's a lot of waste in government. And so I registered as a Democrat, and I felt strongly about those things. That said, when it comes to a local town, most of the issues have nothing to do with the reasons we registered for a party. Locally, we don't handle abortion issues. We don't handle military spending. We're discussing where a school gets built. Where a school gets built is about using logic and reason to make the best decision. It's nothing to do with ideology. Where a senior center gets built, if it gets built, that's not about ideology. That's about logic and reason and tax numbers and math and just facts. So when I was a member of the Democratic Town Committee in Brantford and we're debating issues that aren't political or certainly weren't ideological and picking sides based on a political party, that made no sense to me. And so when you ask, am I friends with Jamie Cosgrove? No, I am supportive of anyone who is honest and straightforward and makes logical decisions, especially on a local level. On a local level, it's about math. It's about facts and evidence. And people yell and scream and they pick a side because they're registered a Democrat or Republican. It makes zero sense to me. A little fact I may have mentioned before, but Cosgrove, when he ran as a Republican, he's a lifelong Democrat. And there were Democrats pissed at him for not running as a Democrat. They both wanted him. So while the current Democratic Party wants to yell and scream, in general, he had broad support among everybody and probably still does. So no, the answer is, am I friends with him? No. I know him well. On a professional level, yes. I know his family in passing. I've never been to dinner with them, never had a barbecue at his house. And that should answer that question. The next question is, you often sound like a Republican. Why are you a registered Democrat? Okay, so I will answer this by giving you a little bit of information about myself. In about 13 years ago, I'm 43, so maybe about 15 years ago now, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. And if you're not familiar with that sort of religion, it's a religion that is very cultish. The belief is you're a witness or you're not. And if you're not a witness, you are going to die at the end of the world at Armageddon. We did our best not to be part of the world. We didn't vote. We weren't involved in politics. We had a different life. We're the people that went door to door. You were very much encouraged not to read anything that questioned your beliefs, not to read anything from anybody who was not a witness. And even the books you read from school were questionable at times. They were, you got to be careful what you were allowed to read. Through a series of events, I chose, I was kind of moving up the ranks. I was a guy who gave a bunch of speeches. I was a guy who helped a lot of people within the religion. At about 28, I decided that was it, based on a series of events. And so soon after that, I moved to Brantford. Difficult time. You leave your family behind for the most part. Most of your friends, family, once you leave the witnesses, you're out. They don't talk to you. It's how it is. That's fine. Moved to Brantford, got involved politically, and realized, I would say about a year in, that it made no sense to pick sides locally based on ideology. It didn't make any sense. I went door to door all over the place for Unctor Ross. I worked hard on the campaign. The plan was eventually to run for the RTM, maybe more in the future. It just didn't make sense to me. And what I'm about to say applies to Democrats and Republicans equally. It didn't make sense to leave one cultish organization and be happy with that freedom only to join another. It didn't make sense that I had to support whoever had a D after their name. And for the life of me, I couldn't do it. And so once I left the DTC, I said I started a new site because I thought I can still be involved, inform people without having to pick a side. Well, it just so happened at the time the Democrats were doing some things that were messed up. The Tabor nonsense, a lot of those are lawsuits, that 20 million in lawsuits. There were nonstop fights with Wayne Cook, more lawsuits over taxes. There was just nonstop things happening. And it wasn't just that there were, issues happened. They were handled so poorly. Unctor Ross couldn't keep his cool. If you watch Jamie Cosgrove handle Wayne Cook now, it's just, go ahead, take your time, now that you're done. It was arguing and fights and nonsense. They were demonizing Republicans for no reason. At the time, the third selectman was John Opie. And I didn't know him when I was supporting Unctor Ross in his election against him. They're actually friends, by the way. But John Opie's like one of the smartest guys you're ever going to meet, down to earth, a decent human being. But I was campaigning against him for reasons I didn't even understand. I was just for the Democrat. That made no sense to me. So as we wrote, we saw things that were wrong, things that were happening that didn't make sense. Financially, the town always did okay because we had the Board of Finance. And that was Joe Mooney. He wasn't going to let it get political. But there were a lot of political things happening that were problems and caused by the administration that didn't need to happen. So I was critical of them in many cases, presented the facts. Cosgrove got in, and no joke, within a month, a lot of that stuff was over. Tabor lawsuits were done. A huge fight over public works was done. Massive issues were taken care of almost immediately. That's not me making that up. That happened. So am I supportive of a Republican? No, I'm supportive of someone who came in and did the right thing and got things done. You may also notice I've been supportive of Sean Scanlon. There are things I very much disagree with Sean Scanlon. He took a position on the head of the Bonding and Revenue Committee in Hartford. Already there's some things I disagree with. The child tax credit, not a terrible thing, but it could be much better in my opinion. There's some new funding which is separate from the budget at the state level that's happening. I don't agree with. But I've never asked him a question he hasn't answered honestly. And I support that. Now, will I support him in the next election? We'll talk about that when he's up again, and we talk about who to endorse and what the issues are. But at least we're having a discussion on issues, and I don't have to question whether he's telling me the truth or not. Yes, he's political, but I don't have to question whether he's telling me the truth or not. So do I sound like a Republican on financial matters? I may, but let me tell you a secret about the Republican Party. They're not fiscally conservative. Republicans spend just as much money nationally as Democrats do. That's all a joke. I am for value. So I believe in people that make more money, pay higher taxes. I believe in what I would call a social contract we make with each other. That society will provide you an education. Whether you believe it or not, society pretty much already provides you a college education if you choose to do it. If you choose to go to a private school, it's a different story or a different state. But for the most part, Gateway is not cost prohibitive. You can go to high school, go to Gateway for 2 years, go to Southern for a few years, not be burdened with crazy debt, and be prepared for the real world. The contract we make is that once we get that education, once we get roads, once we get police and fire and all those basics, if we succeed beyond a certain level, then we pay a little more back. It doesn't seem crazy to me. It doesn't seem crazy that if I sign a contract with some national podcast, whatever, for $10 million a year that I pay a higher tax rate. I'm okay with that because when I didn't have that, the government was there to help. The society was there to help. They paid if I was unemployed on unemployment. They paid healthcare if I need. There were things that were covered that were taken care of for everyone on the low side. So if someone gets up there, they pay back with larger amount of money. The Republican aspect of me is I'm for saving, I'm for investing, I have an understanding of finance. The reason that's so valuable, this is interesting because Chris Murphy we talked about this on the podcast, is that the system is rigged. It's rigged toward the billionaires. And you have Democrats that are so lost in billionaires making their money and controlling so much money that they have forgotten that they, by saving and investing and being smart and getting up every day and going to work, even at a low income level, can get ahead. Even people who do not make a lot of money can get ahead. Two people making $50,000 a year, living together, have a $100,000 income that's higher than the median. They can save, they can buy a house, they can invest, they can get ahead. So what is lost in so much of the political rhetoric is we still have a system that allows you to get ahead, that allows you to be, and even if your generation is poor, you come in and not inheriting anything, you can be that first generation that leaves something to your kids, and over time, generational wealth is built. The road is there. Where I lose Democrats sometimes, or where I lose the connection, is they are so focused on the wealthy control this high percentage. Yes, that's true. But that's not preventing you from having a good and comfortable life and getting ahead. Now, there's some things I very, very much agree with Democrats on. One thing that can absolutely derail you financially, even with the best effort, is healthcare. One serious illness, and it can knock out a lifetime of savings. So if you haven't seen a theme yet, it's this. I don't side with any side. We look at issues individually. But we understand that there's a social contract, that the more we can support people on the bottom, the more money we can funnel to that group. And I'm not saying waste. If we can support those people on the bottom when they get higher, and even if a small percentage of do get to that high level, they pay a little bit more in taxes. They pay back a little more. That's the social contract we make. So is that sounding like a Republican or sounding like a Democrat? I don't think so. People yell that I sound like a Republican when I'm going after a Democrat, or like a Republican, or like a Democrat when I'm going after a Republican. This year, clearly, I don't feel Tom Brockett is qualified to be the first elected. I think most of town agrees with me. It's unfortunate he will be the nominee. Ray Dunbar, I think a little bit more highly of as his running mate. However, it was an awful moment last week when he read a ridiculous letter that absolutely disparaged our town. Last year, I endorsed every Democrat for office. Not because they were all amazing Democrats. Some were, some weren't. In some cases, they were running against terrible Republicans. I've made this clear about Mark Riccio. I don't think he's qualified to run for anything. He's on the RTM, and that's the highest I would ever put him. He probably shouldn't run for that. Who I endorse, who I support, has nothing to do with what party they are. It's how they represent the town and how they help further that social contract, which helps people on a lower level get ahead, and then ask for those that get ahead to pay a little bit more back. That doesn't seem crazy to me. An example of that is Scanlon's tax credit. He wants to give a tax credit to families. Okay. Many of those families are making up to $400,000 a year. Does that make sense to me? Not really. Would I rather see that money focused on things like childcare or the Care for Kids program or pre-K, which allows kids to have daycare and education at an earlier age so parents can go to work? Yes. I want them working. So I would see tax dollars focused on those things that help those lower classes be in the workforce, be productive, get ahead, save, put into a 401k, put into IRA, put into a Roth to get ahead and have savings and build that wealth down the road. As they make more money, they pay more in taxes. That seems normal. I don't think that's Democrat or Republican. That's just what the American dream always was. And if you think about it, that's what unions were. Unions basically said, okay, here's your wages. Without you even realizing it, we're going to take some of those and put them in investment. Without you even realizing we're going to negotiate vacation time. Without you realizing we're going to negotiate some labor terms. People can still do that, union or not. That's pretty much what I stand for. The next question is, what is your goal? And so, first of all, I hope if there's any questions, feel free to ask those, but I hope I'm answering the questions in a way that's understandable. My goal for Branford 7 was never to be a business. It was always just going to be a side thing. I did consulting. It was never supposed to be a business. When you reached a point that it was, 60, 70,000 views a month, you say to yourself, at some point, I should try to monetize this. And I did. And we put ads on it. We went and sold some ads. We did okay. Never did phenomenal by any means, but did okay. It was never my sole source of income. To this day, it is not. In the last year and a half, 2 years, media has changed. And the idea of strictly by the book, tell the facts like it is, media just really doesn't exist. It's all analysis or opinion. And with that, I wanted to go away from just the written word and to get on camera to be able to explain why I was telling you what I was telling you. I thought it was far more transparent. For many years, people knew my name but didn't know who I was, didn't recognize me out at dinner or in town. So with that, the downside of that is others can give you, oh, Steve's an asshole, or he's a Republican, or he's a Democrat, or this is wrong, or he's making this up, or he's friends with this person. And all these rumors can happen without me even knowing about them. On camera, you can ask the questions. You can send me an email. I can answer these questions in real time. You can have, and we've had, those who have watched this have seen back and forth many, many times on issues, and I can answer in real time my answer to those issues. You don't have to agree. But even those who, disagree, I hope have responded similar to what I'm seeing some of these emails, is that, you help me think a different way. You help me look at it a different way. There's an old adage that I've been using for many times. I'm not sure how old it is, but before anyone takes a stand on any issue, you should be able to explain at least two positions. Explain why you can be for or against gay marriage, why you should be for or against abortion laws, why you should be for or against an increase in military spending, why you should be for and against. If you can explain for and against, and there may be more nuanced, 100 other opinions, but at least two, before you take a stance, it makes you far more informed and more able to defend that position. Also, the ability to change your mind should new information come in. And that's what I want this podcast to be. Now, if somebody calls and says, we want you to have a national show, yes, of course, I take that in a heartbeat. There will be some changes in the near future to what you see. So first, Branford 7 is going to change. The name of the website will be Atticus News pretty soon. The purpose of that is we'll have a Branford section, but it won't be just Branford. We have to expand that. For monetary reasons, I have to be larger than Branford. At some point, if it's going to be what I do full time, I have to do more than Branford. Second, the podcast will always be here. We're going to start a second series of videos that have to do with financial literacy. Those would not be live. There's going to be videos that we create. You can watch them anytime on understanding financial literacy, making smart decisions on saving money, how to invest, how to look at stocks, how to look at mutual funds, that sort of thing. That's a passion of mine. It means a lot to me. I think that's the secret for so many to take a step forward. Financial freedom is freedom in general. More money in your hand means you have the option to make more decisions. The less money you have, the more limited you are. So I don't care what race you are, black, white, tall, short, fat, thin, whatever you are, the stock market doesn't care. The mutual fund doesn't care what you are. The ability to save exists for everyone. And I mean everyone that has a cell phone in their hand, a Netflix subscription, and $200 sneakers, you have the ability to save money. And the decisions we make every single day impact that. You can find a way to save $1 a day. You're going to put you very quickly ahead of most people in the country when it comes to savings. And we're going to start those series of videos. There's a site on Facebook started. There'll be a YouTube page for that. That'll be separate. And there'll be a stream on Atticus News on financial literacy, and we'll focus on that. So that's the goal. The goal is to inform and be a logical place to talk about issues. If you come thinking, I'm going to push a Democratic narrative or Republican narrative, you're likely not going to be happy. In general, neither one is right all the time. I lean a little bit more left, especially on social issues. On fiscal issues, it's hard to even say one leans Republican because the Republican Party isn't conservative. You know what's conservative is someone who treats money, especially other people's money, as valuable. I look at Brantford's government as conservative, despite huge spending on schools and senior centers and community houses and a new firehouse in Indian Neck and far more infrastructure improvements. Why are we conservative? Because those improvements bring value to the town. They're not waste. Now, some projects, I think, in my opinion, were waste. I thought the Blackstone Library project made no sense at the numbers that it came in at. If it was $2 million, would have had no problem with it. At $5.5 million with that roof, that was crazy. What I will always push for is value. Are we getting something? Are we getting most for our money? The affordable housing project, $20+ million for 60 units? I don't think so. There's far better ways to use that money. That's not Democratic or Republican. That's just smart. We'll always advocate for that on this podcast. So I hope that answered the questions of this debate that happened over the weekend. You don't have to like me, but I want you to know that the door is always open to ask questions. You can always send me an email. You can always send me a text. My cell phone number is 203-710-6831. Please let me know who you are when you text. But that door is open. I'm willing to have that conversation. And I'm willing to answer the question publicly on camera. There's no reason for rumors or innuendo or false stuff to be out there. I'm an open book, especially when it comes to politics. And so I hope this answered those questions. To those that didn't ask those questions or just watching this for the first time, or maybe a regular viewer, I hope that's a reminder of what we're trying to do. Let's be reasonable, understand more sides to an issue than we currently do, and be able to look at issues on their own merits. Obviously in a big picture as well, but instead of Democrat versus Republican, it's what are the merits, the pros and cons of this issue, and where we go from there. So that's the podcast for today. I wanted to focus on those questions. I appreciate them coming in. I appreciate that debate ending with sending those in to me, and I think hopefully that was helpful. If there was a response to that, just send me an email. And to the commenters, thank you very much. The comments help a lot. And today was me basically talking, but when we're talking specific issues, the back and forth helps. So please keep those up as well. We'll be back tomorrow with looking at some more headlines and some issues. If there's something specific you'd like me to discuss, please send it over. Until then, I hope you get outside. It's amazing out, spectacular day, and looks like a really good and hot week at the end of the week too. And until then, I'll see you tomorrow at 4.